Very good day, students. In this video, I will explain to you how to correctly and accurately determine the residential status of an individual. The students have come to me saying that they have doubts as far as this concept is concerned, and they make mistakes in figuring out the residential status. And you need to know that this topic is very important because the computation of total income depends on correct determination of the residential status. In one or more questions in the exam paper, you will definitely be asked to figure out the residential status, and if you make a mistake there, your solution will go wrong and you will lose out on marks. So in this video, what we will do is there will be two parts. In part one, we will understand the concept, and in the second part, we will look at illustrations. Now, an individual. So in this video, we are talking only about an individual. So we will focus on this. We will not focus on non-individuals. So an individual can be a resident or a non-resident. The residential status of an individual can be that of a resident or a non-resident. Okay. The provisions guide you in determining whether an individual is a resident. They don't guide you in determining whether the individual is a non-resident. So the question will be, sir, who is a non-resident then? So non-resident means a person who is not a resident. So non-resident definition is negative. So logically, what this means is, first, what you need to find out? You need to find out whether an individual is a resident. This is the first step. Only if the individual is not a resident, that means you can say that the individual will become a non-resident. Okay. So an individual can be a resident or a non-resident. If the individual is not a resident, that means the individual will be a non-resident. Now, once an individual is a resident, there is a further subclassification. An individual can be a resident and ordinarily resident ROR, and an individual can be a resident but not ordinarily resident or RNOR. So basically, in a nutshell, an individual can be ROR, RNOR, or a NR. Okay. Now there is one logic that you need to keep in mind, and this will help you in better understanding of this concept. Residential status determines the degree of nexus of a person with India, the degree of connection with India, the degree of economic connection or economic nexus with India. Greater the nexus, greater the taxability. Greater the nexus, greater the taxability. And what is the order? The order is ROR, RNOR, and NR. So in case of ROR, the nexus is greatest and therefore the taxability is greatest. In case of a non-resident, the nexus with India is least and therefore the taxability is also least. And RNOR is a category which falls in between ROR and NR. So just to take a quick look at the scope of total income. Okay. So the residential status, what it does, it determines the scope of total income. And the scope of total income will help you to compute the total income. And you will apply the rate of tax on the total income to compute the tax liability. So tax liability, for that you need to find out the total income. For that you need to figure out the scope of total income, and that depends on the residential status. So everything is linked. So you start with the residential status and then you compute the total income and then you compute the tax liability of total income. So you understand why residential status is so important. So basically the scope of total income or the total income and consequently the tax liability will be the greatest if the nexus with India is the greatest, and it will be least if the nexus with India is least. And for that, we categorize the residential status as ROR, RNOR, or NR. Now, if you look at this table for scope of total income, you will realize this clearly. So there is this Indian income, and then there is a foreign income. So in the case of ROR, the nexus with India is the greatest. It is actually full. Okay. So the taxability is also the greatest. Indian income as well as foreign income is taxable in the case of ROR. That means the global income or the worldwide income. Okay. Compared to ROR, there is a lesser nexus with India in case of RNOR. That means the nexus is partial. The nexus is part. And therefore what happens is Indian income is taxable, but foreign income is not taxable except this particular case. In the case of non-resident, nexus with India is least or nil, and therefore what is taxable is only the Indian income, and foreign income is not at all taxable. So greater the nexus, Greater the taxability, lesser the nexus with India, lesser the taxability. And this is the logic that you will see or you will observe when you look at the provisions of determining residential status. Now we will discuss how to find out the residential status of an individual. Now there are certain rules which need to be applied to find out the residential status of an individual. They are provided in the Act. Okay, and the relevant section to find out the residential status is section 6. Okay, now these rules can be categorized into 3. 1. Special rules, 2. General rules, and 3. Stateless rule. Okay, what is the need of these rules? How do these rules help? What is the function of these rules? These rules are applied to check whether an individual is a resident. As I told you before, what you need to do is not to find out whether an individual is a non-resident, but first to find out whether an individual is a resident, because if the individual is a resident, that means the residential status is that of a resident. And then you need to check whether an individual will be ROR or RNOR. But if the individual is not a resident, then it will automatically mean that the individual is a non-resident. So that means you should not find out whether the individual is a non-resident, but instead you should find out whether an individual is a resident under any of the rules. So this is the purpose of these rules, to find out whether an individual is a resident. Therefore, if an individual is not a resident under any of these rules, it automatically means that he will be a non-resident. So what we will do is, first we will study the provisions of these rules, special rules, general rules, and stateless rule. And then we will summarize the steps to be followed in ultimately determining the residential status of an individual, whether a resident or non-resident. So we will now move to the special rules. Now there are 4 special rules, 1, 2, 3, 4, and they target specific categories of individuals. Okay, they have specific set of conditions to be satisfied for a special rule to apply. Okay, now these special rules you need to apply to find out whether an individual is a resident. And once the individual is a resident, then you need to further figure out whether the individual is a resident and ordinarily resident ROR, or resident but not ordinarily resident RNOR. So first rule is the ship crew rule. Okay, it applies to whom? It applies to a citizen of India, not a foreign citizen of India, who leaves India. Okay, he is not coming to India, he leaves India. When? In the previous year, as a member of the crew of an Indian ship. As a member of the crew, not as a passenger. As a member of the crew of an Indian ship, not a foreign ship. Okay, so citizen of India leaves India in the previous year as member of the crew of which ship? Of an Indian ship. If these conditions are met, then ship crew rule, which is a special rule, becomes applicable. And now you need to figure out, firstly, whether the individual falling under this rule will be a resident. Okay, for figuring that out, what is applicable is the basic stay condition. Basic stay condition. And what is the basic stay condition as far as this rule is concerned? The individual will become a resident if he is in India for 182 days or more in the previous year. Why 182 days? 182 days is basically half of the year, 6 months. Okay, so more 182 days or more means that for the majority of the year the person is in India. Okay, for more than half of the year the person is in India, and therefore the connection or the nexus with India is supposed to be good enough for the person to be categorized as a resident. Okay, now this is called the basic stay condition. So if the person is in India for 182 days or more in the previous year, the person will become a resident under the ship crew rule. Now once the person becomes a resident, what we discuss is that now we need to move to the next step and figure out whether the person will be a ROR or a RNOR. Okay, and for that what you need to check is what we call as the secondary stay conditions. Secondary stay conditions, and there are 2 conditions. Okay, 1, the person is a non-resident in 9 out of 10 preceding previous years. Second, the person is in India for 729 days or less in the preceding 7 previous years. Okay. Now, if any of the above conditions are satisfied, one or two or both, then the person will become a RNOR resident but not ordinarily resident. If none of the above conditions is satisfied, the person will become a ROR. Now see the logic. In the secondary stay conditions, what you will find are these two situations. Okay. Now these two situations are basically indicative of a scenario where the nexus of that person with India is very, very less. How? He is a non-resident in 9 out of 10 preceding years. That means in 90% of the preceding previous years, in 9 out of 10 preceding previous years, he is a non-resident. 9 out of 10 or 10 out of 10. Okay. In 9 out of 10 at least, he is a non-resident. That means the nexus with India or his economic connection with India is actually very, very less. And look at the second situation. He is in India for 729 days or less. 729 days or less. 729 days, basically it means a period of 2 years in the aggregate. Okay. So he is in the preceding 7 previous years, he is actually in India for a period which is 2 years or less. That means again, his presence is very, very less. That means his nexus is very, very less. And therefore, if either this or both are satisfied, that means the person will be RNOR. The person will be resident, but he is not an ordinarily resident. Okay, he is not an ordinarily resident because his presence in India is quite less. Okay, and and therefore what you see is if none of the above conditions are satisfied, okay, that means what it means? It means that his presence in India is actually to a good extent in the preceding years. And therefore, we will categorize the person as ROR in such case, resident and ordinarily resident. So within ROR and RNOR, you see secondary stay conditions will help you to figure out the degree of presence of that person in India from an historical point of view. That means in the preceding years. If the nexus is good enough, we will say that yes, you will become an ROR. That means you have a great amount of nexus with India and consequently your taxability will be the greatest. Global income, worldwide income will become taxable in India. Okay, but if if your presence in India is not to that extent as far as these secondary stay conditions are concerned, then we will make you a RNOR. Okay, that means your taxability will be lesser than that of a ROR. So this is the logic. So when you check the basic stay conditions, you need to check this for the current previous year. And when you check the secondary stay conditions, you need to check these from a historical point of view. That means in the preceding period, in the preceding previous years. Now the second special rule is the employment rule. Employment rule also applies to a citizen of India, just like the ship crew rule. Employment rule also applies to a citizen of India who leaves India, not coming to India, who leaves India when in the previous year. For what? For the purposes of employment outside India. Now employment doesn't mean that you are employed on a salary basis with some employer. Employment means that you are merely employed. Okay, you are keeping yourself busy. That means you are doing something. Even if you are in a profession, or even if you are going outside to start a business, even then you will be said to be leaving India for the purposes of employment outside India. Okay, so the word employment is wide. Now in the case of employment rule also, the basic stay conditions for becoming a resident are the same as that under the ship crew rule. And then the secondary stay conditions for categorization as ROR or R and OR are also the same as that under the ship crew rule. So basically the conditions under the ship crew rule and the employment rule are same. Now we come to rule 3 and rule 4. Rule 3 is called visit rule. Rule 4 is called visit and income rule. And for this, the condition is that the citizen of India, same as ship crew rule and employment rule, see, citizen of India is covered under all these 4 rules. Okay. So under visit rule and visit and income rule, what is the condition? Citizen of India In addition, a person of Indian origin, a PIO, is also covered. A PIO is also covered. So a citizen of India or a person of India or a person of Indian origin who comes on a visit to India in the previous year. See the difference. Ship crew rule, the person is leaving. Employment rule, the person is leaving India in the previous year. But in the visit rule and visit and income rule, the person has come on a visit to India in the previous year. Okay, this is the difference. The other difference is ship crew rule and employment rule applies only to a citizen of India. But visit rule and visit and income rule applies not only to a citizen of India but also to a PIO. Okay. Now, once this condition is satisfied, you need to figure out whether visit rule will apply or visit and income rule will apply. And for that, you need to check one thing. You need to compute one thing. What you need to compute is total income, but which is other than income from foreign sources. So total income, and that will not include income from foreign sources. In other words, it is what? It is total income from Indian sources. Okay, so you need to compute that. So that will indicate you what is the extent of economic nexus or economic connection of that person in India, with India. Okay, this will actually tell us, this figure will actually tell us as to what is the extent of income the person is generating from Indian sources. And to that extent, whether his nexus with India can be said to be less or more. Okay, and the threshold for this purpose is 15 lakh. If this total income other than income from foreign sources is up to 15 lakh in the previous year, then visit rule applies. And if it is more than 15 lakh in the previous year, then visit and income rule applies. So that means within visit rule and visit and income rule, which rule indicates a greater economic nexus with India? Visit and income rule, because the total income from Indian sources is more than 15 lakh. But visit rule has a lesser nexus comparatively, because the total income other than income from foreign sources is only up to 15 lakh. Now, as far as visit rule is concerned, note that the rules are the same as ship crew rule and employment rule. Both the basic conditions for becoming a resident and then the secondary stay conditions for becoming ROR or RNOR. So in effect, the rules for ship crew rule, employment rule and visit rule for resident and for ROR, RNOR are same. There is a difference when we talk about visit and income rule. Okay. In the visit and income rule, the person has a total income other than income from foreign sources more than 15 lakh in the previous year. So what we need to check, the basic stay condition in this case for becoming a resident is different. And what is the condition? The person should be in India for 120 days or more in the previous year. See, the threshold of 182 days has been reduced to 120 days. So the threshold is a lesser threshold to become a resident. But here, there are twin conditions for becoming a resident. The person should not only be in India for 120 days or more in the current previous year, but also should be in India for 365 days or more in the preceding 4 previous years. Okay, at least should be in India for at least 1 year in the preceding 4 previous years. So both these conditions need to be satisfied. Is in India for 120 days or more in the previous year, and in India for 365 days or more in the preceding 4 previous years. If yes, then under the visit and income rule, the individual would become a resident. Now, once a resident, the next step is what? We need to check whether the individual will be ROR or RNOR. But in visit and income rule case, the position will differ. We will not go this way. We are not going to check the stay conditions. We are not going to check the secondary stay conditions. Okay, so these secondary stay conditions don't apply in the case of visit and income rule. What happens in the case of visit and income rule? If these twin conditions are satisfied, the person becomes a resident, and you look at the dotted lines. Straight away, we then check something more. We check that whether the person is in India for less than 182 days. If yes, then the person straight away becomes a RNOR, resident, and then RNOR. This means that under the visit and income rule, the person cannot become ROR. The person will always be categorized as RNOR. But for that, the condition should be that the person should be 120 days or more in the previous year in India, and 365 days or more in the preceding 4 years, and less than 182 days in the current previous year. Okay, so in effect, the person should be in India in the current previous year for how many days? 120 days or more and less than 182 days. 120 days or more and less than 182 days. And 365 days or more in the preceding 4 years. In that case, if the visit and income rule applies, then the person will be RNOR. The person cannot be a ROR. So under the ship crew rule, employment rule, and visit rule, the person will be a resident and then a ROR or a RNOR. But in the case of visit and income rule, the person will be resident and straight away RNOR. Okay, so what do you need to do? You need to first of all check whether any of the special rule is applicable. Okay, for that you need to check whether the conditions are met. If the condition is met, then the person will fall within a special rule, and then you need to check the basic stay condition and consequently the secondary stay conditions to figure out the status of an individual as a resident or a ROR or RNOR. In the case of visit and income rule, as that of a RNOR. So this is basically the sequence to figure out, and this is what we have discussed already. So what we discussed under the visit and income rule is that the secondary stay conditions need not be checked. The secondary stay conditions need not be checked. What just need to be checked under the visit and income rule is that the person will become a RNOR if he is in India for less than 182 days in the previous year. Less than 182 days in the previous year. We are talking about the visit and income rule. Now the question will be, sir, what if the individual is in India for more than 182 days or more? Visit and income rule is applicable. The person is a citizen of India or the person is a PIO and he comes on a visit to India in the previous year and total income other than income from foreign sources is more than 15 lakh in the previous year and he is in India for 120 days or more in the previous year and 365 days or more in the preceding 4 previous years and 182 days or more in the current previous year. That means in such case visit and income rule will not apply. And what will happen? We will move to the general rule. We will move to the 182-day general rule and there the person will become a resident because the threshold there to become a resident is 182 days or more. Okay, so in that case what will happen? If however such individual is in India for 182 days or more in the previous year, the 182-day rule, the general rule will become applicable to him instead and then he will become a resident. Okay, and in the general rule which we will look at in some time, the person will then need to be categorized as ROR or RNOR because under 182-day general rule the person becomes a resident and then further ROR or RNOR. So this will be the treatment in case of visit and income rule. So if the person is satisfying all these conditions under the visit and income rule, the person will be categorized as RNOR, not an ROR. But if the person is for 182 days or more in the current previous year, then instead of this rule, the 182-day general rule will become applicable and then the person will become a resident and consequently then we will need to check whether the person will be treated as a ROR or RNOR. Okay, is this clear till this point of time? Okay. Now for visit and income rule and visit and income rule, we saw that this rule is also applicable to a PIO, person of Indian origin. So what is a person of Indian origin? PIO means an individual. If he or any of his parents or grandparents was born in undivided India. What is undivided India? India before partition. So for example, if one of his grandparents was born in Pakistan before partition, that means he was born, the grandparent was born in undivided India, so that individual will be a PIO. Okay, visit rule and visit and income rule apply to a PIO as well. Now for visit rule and visit and income rule, we saw that we need to compute something which is called total income other than income from foreign sources, for which the threshold is 15 lakh. Okay, to figure out whether the person will fall under visit rule or visit and income rule. So total income other than income from foreign sources is something that you need to compute. So the question is, sir, what is meant by income from foreign sources, because whatever is income from foreign sources, you need to exclude that, because what you need to compute is total income other than income from foreign sources. So sir, what is income from foreign sources? So income from foreign sources is what? It is income which accrues or arises outside India. So it is accruing outside India, it is arising outside India. So you have a business outside India, and sales are happening outside India. That means income from such sales from the business is accruing or arising outside India. So it is income from foreign sources, right? So income is accruing or arising outside India, it is income from foreign sources. Okay, which is not deemed to accrue or arise in India. In section 9, you would have read that there are certain incomes which accrue or arise outside India, but still they are deemed as if they are accruing or arising in India. In the case of FTAs, in the case of royalty, in the case of interest, we have seen certain incomes which are actually arising outside India, but they are deemed to arise in India. And therefore, since they are deemed to arise in India, they will be categorized as Indian income. We cannot say that it is foreign income, and therefore such incomes are not income from foreign sources, which is not deemed to accrue or arise in India. Okay, so that means income from foreign sources which is accruing or arising outside India and is not deemed to accrue or arise in India, that is called income from foreign sources. Okay, one point here. Even if the income is accruing or arising outside India, but if the income is being derived from a business or from a profession, and that business is controlled in India, or that profession is set up in India, then even if the income is accruing or arising outside India, it will be considered as income from Indian sources, not income from foreign sources. Except, why? Because there is a nexus with India, because business is being controlled in India or the profession is set up in India, then even if the income from such profession or income from such business is arising outside India, it will still not be treated as income from foreign sources, mainly because the control or the setup is in India, and therefore the connection is with India, and therefore it will be treated as Indian income. So this is income from foreign sources. You need to compute it accordingly. We will look at an illustration and see how to compute this. Therefore, total income other than income from foreign sources, it can also be said as total income from Indian sources. Okay, so it means total income computed after excluding income from foreign sources. And what is income from foreign sources? We just now saw. Sir, what about exempt income? If the income is exempt under section 10, for example, what will happen? So exempt income will not be considered, because total income refers to taxable income. Exempt income does not come within the scope of total income in the first place. It doesn't come within the purview of computing the total income. It doesn't enter the total income. So therefore, total income other than income from foreign sources will not include exempt income. Now some quick points. All special rules that we saw above are applicable to a citizen of India. Right? Citizen, citizen of India, citizen of India. All the four special rules. But only visit rule and visit and income rule is applicable to a PIO. Okay, person of Indian origin. Only rules number 3 and 4. Ship crew rule, employment rule is not applicable to a PIO. Keep this in mind. Ship crew rule and employment rule apply to an individual leaving India during the previous year. But visit rule and visit and income rule apply to an individual coming on a visit to India during the previous year. This is what we saw. Ship crew rule leaves India, employment rule leaves India, visit rule and visit and income rule comes on a visit to India. This is the difference you should note. Okay. Ship crew rule applies only to a crew member, not to a passenger of the ship. Further, it applies to an Indian ship, not a foreign ship. Okay, this is what we noted. Current year's stay threshold to become a resident under a special rule is 182 days. 182 days, current year threshold, basic stay condition, 182 days or more. Okay, but it is 120 days under the visit and income rule. So there is a lower threshold, 120 days or more under the visit and income rule. This is the difference that you should keep in mind. So these are the special rules, and how to use these rules is that First of all, you should go to the special rules and check whether any of the special rule applies. If yes, then you should check whether the individual is meeting these stay conditions under the basic stay condition and secondary stay conditions, and accordingly you should figure out whether the individual is a resident, and further a ROR or RNOR. In the case of visit and income rule, the person would not be a ROR, the person would be a RNOR. Okay, so that means the special rules will help you to decide whether an individual is a resident. Now we come to the general rule. General rule by nature is the default rule, it is generally applicable. So logically, general rule will not apply if a special rule is applying. If a special rule is applicable, then you should not come to the general rule. You should come to the general rule and check it only when you figure out that none of the special rules apply. Only then you should come to the general rule. General rule applies if the individual does not fall within any of the special rules given above. There are two general rules, and these are called 182-day rule and 60-day rule. These rules are applicable to all individuals, and there are no specific conditions, like there are these conditions which were to be satisfied to fall under a special rule. There are no such special conditions for the general rule. So that means these rules are applicable to all individuals and specify the general criteria of a person to become a resident in India. Okay. The individual will become a resident in India if he satisfies the stay conditions or the presence in India conditions under those general rules, and once a resident, he will then be classified as ROR or RNOR in the same way that we saw under the special rules. Okay, now we look at the two general rules. First, we look at the 182-day rule. What is the basic stay condition? The person will become a resident if he is in India for 182 days or more in the previous year. Okay. For 182 days or more in the previous year, once a resident, then what we need to do next? We need to check the secondary stay conditions, and there are these two conditions. If any of the above conditions are satisfied, the person becomes RNOR. If none of the above conditions is satisfied, the person becomes ROR. And note that the basic stay condition as well as the secondary stay conditions under the 182-day rule are exactly the same as that for ship crew rule, employment rule, and visit rule that we discussed some time back. The basic stay condition and secondary stay conditions, they are the same for 182-day rule as well. So nothing different which you need to remember. Okay. So that means if any person is 182 days or more in the current previous year, the person will become a resident. And then you need to check the secondary stay conditions. What if the person is in India in the previous year for less than 182 days? That means he is not becoming a resident under 182-day rule. Okay. There may be a case where a person has, say, moved out of India. Okay. And the special rules are not applicable. And the person is there in India, say, for 60 days or 70 days or 100 days. Okay. That means not 182 days or more. Then that means will the person not become a resident in India? Say the person is moving to a foreign country for the first time. He has always been in India. So just because he is in India in the current previous year for, say, 100 days, and then for the rest of the year he is outside India, and throughout his life he has been in India. So the mere fact that he has moved out of India in this year will make him a non-resident. And that's why, to capture such cases where the person is not meeting the 182-day rule criteria to become a resident, there is an alternative rule which is a 60-day rule. So there they say the person will still be treated as a resident even if he is less than 182 days in the current previous year, provided two conditions are satisfied. Okay, he is 60 days or more in the previous year. Even a presence of at least 60 days will make him a resident. Need not be for 182 days. Even 60-day present will make him a resident. But a second condition also need to be satisfied along with this. And the second condition is that he should have been in India for 365 days or more in the preceding 4 previous year. So at least he should have been in India for an aggregate period of at least 1 year, 365 days or more in the preceding 4 years. So if these twin conditions are satisfied, then even if the person is for less than 182 days in the current previous year in India, and he is only for at least 60 days in the previous year, and further satisfies this 365-day condition, then the person will still be treated as a resident. And then next we will need to check these secondary stay conditions and make the person ROR or RNOR. Okay, so under the general rule, 182-day rule and 60-day rule, these two alternative rules are present to figure out whether a person is a resident, and then further a ROR or RNOR. We have already noted in the special rules above, when we were talking about visit and income rule, that under the visit and income rule, if all these conditions, if this is satisfied, and this is satisfied, okay, but if the person is not less than 182 days, that means if the person is 182 days or more in India, then what we need to do? Then we need to straight away come to the general rule, and then we need to see that the person is 182 days or more in India in the previous year, and then under the 182-day rule the person will be a resident, and then ROR or RNOR. Note this special difference in the case of visit and income rule. But in the case of visit and income rule, if the person is for less than 182 days, okay, then the person will not be categorized as ROR, the person will be a resident, and then straight away a RNOR. Okay. So this is a sequence that we have discussed that we need to apply to figure out the residential status of a person, whether the person is a resident, and further ROR or RNOR under the general rules. General rules are applicable to all individuals, whether citizen of India or person of Indian origin or any other individual, say a pure foreign national. Special rules will not apply to a pure foreign national, because special rules apply when the person is either a citizen of India or a PIO. What if the person is a pure foreign national? Then special rules will not apply. Then we will need to see under the general rule. So general rules basically apply to all individuals, and that's why these are called general rules. An individual who is in India for 182 days or more in the previous year would become a resident under the 182-day rule. And then one need not check the 60-day rule. So if you are a resident under this rule, you need not check this rule. But if you are in India for less than 182 days in the previous year, that means if this rule is not applicable, if you are not a resident under this rule, then you can fall back on this rule to figure out whether you are a resident. Okay. Now we come to the third rule, which we call as the stateless rule. Okay. So in stateless rule, we check this rule when we figure out that the person has not become a resident under any of the special rules and also under the general rules. So before treating that person as a non-resident, there is one step, and that step is to check the stateless rule, because under the state rule and under the stateless rule, the person can still become a resident even if he is not becoming a resident under the special rules and the general rules. So why is that? Because the stateless rule seeks to deem a person as a resident in India if certain conditions are fulfilled, even though a person is not a resident under any of the special or general rules. This rule deems a person as a resident, and such person is treated as a RNOR. So under the stateless rule, the person cannot be categorized as ROR. The person will be deemed to be a resident and he will be treated as RNOR. Same formula as visit and income rule. Under the visit and income rule, we saw the person will be treated as a resident and then a RNOR, not a ROR. Same with the stateless rule. But what are the conditions for stateless rules to apply? The individual should be a citizen of India, not a PIO. PIO is not covered. So a person who is not a citizen of India but a PIO will not be covered. A person who is a citizen of India as well as a PIO will be covered because the person is a citizen of India, right? So a citizen of India is covered, and here also you need to compute what? Just like visit rule and visit and income rule, you need to compute total income other than income from foreign sources, which we discussed some time back under the special rules, and it should be greater than 15 lakh. Same under the visit and income rule. Under the visit and income rule also, the person should be a citizen of India or a PIO having total income other than income from foreign sources more than 15 lakh. Similar in the case of stateless rule, but PIO is not applicable. Citizen of India having total income other than income from foreign sources more than 15 lakh. The further condition here is that he should not be liable to tax elsewhere in the world. He should not be liable to tax in any other country or territory by reason of his domicile, residence, or any other criteria of similar nature. Okay. So, for example, in the case of a foreign country may treat a person as liable to tax if the person has a residence there or has his domicile there, right? Right? Or because of any other criteria of similar nature, the country may make a person liable to tax. But if the person is a citizen of India and he has total income from Indian sources more than 15 lakh, that means a sufficient nexus is building up with India. But look, despite having a sufficient nexus with India, the person is not liable to tax elsewhere in any other country or territory. Okay, then what will happen? In such case, the law will deem such person to be a resident and then a RNOR. So the person will not become a non-resident by virtue of this rule. Say if a stateless rule was not in existence, then you would have gone to the special rule. Okay, you would have found out that the person, say, is not covered under any of the special rules. The person is not, or the person is not becoming a resident under any of the special rules, and the person is not becoming a resident under a general rule, and therefore you will come to the conclusion that the person is a non-resident. And you need to note that the Act contains certain provisions whereby non-residents are not liable to tax on certain specified incomes. So the person will likely take advantage of such provisions. Now the government feels that this should not be the case because the person is a citizen of India, the person is having a good economic nexus with India because his Indian sources income is more than 15 lakh, and he has cleverly arranged his presence or his affairs on a global stage in such a fashion that none of the country or territory is able to tax that person. So he is not liable to tax, and also he becomes a non-resident in India. Okay, that means his foreign income is not taxable in India. It is not taxable also anywhere else. So this leads to undesirable double non-taxation. That means there is no taxation in India and there is no taxation either abroad. This rule plugs this gap. Okay, with the result that exemptions available to non-residents under the Act on certain incomes are not available to such a person because the person will not be treated as a non-resident now because the person will now be deemed to be a resident and a RNOR. Now what is liable to tax? A person is liable to tax in a country if there is an income tax liability on such person under the laws of that country. So if the person is liable to income tax, if there is an income tax liability, if the person is required to pay income tax, the person is said to be liable to tax. If the person is liable to tax, the stateless rule will not apply. But say what if if there is an income tax liability, but then there is a exemption which has been notified, for example. Because of that exemption, the person has been exempted from such liability, then also the person will be said to be liable to tax. Why? Because there is an income tax liability. Although it has been exempted, but there is an income tax liability. Once the exemption is withdrawn, the person will need to pay income tax. So in both these situations, exemption is available, exemption is not available. But if there is an income tax liability, the person will be said to be liable to tax. And in such case, stateless rule will not apply. Stateless rule in such case will not apply. Okay, so what you need to do is you need to first check whether a person is a resident under any of the special or general rules. If the person is not a resident under any of the special or general rules, then you need to come to the stateless rule, and then you need to see whether the stateless rule conditions are met or not. If they are met, the person will be deemed to be a resident and will be treated as RNOR. Stateless rule overrides other rules. That means if the person is not a resident under any other rule, even then the person will become a resident under this rule. But sir, what if a person has become a resident under the special rule? Then of course you need not come to the stateless rule and check. Sir, if the person was not a resident under any of the special rules, but I found that the person has become a resident under the general rule, then also the person has already become a resident, then why should you come to the stateless rule? Then there is no need to come to the stateless rule, right? A deemed resident under the stateless rule is always a RNOR, okay? But if the person is already a resident under the other rule, say under the special rule or the general rule, then the person can become a ROR or RNOR. But if the person has become a resident under stateless rule, he cannot become ROR. He will always become a RNOR. Period of stay is not relevant under the stateless rule. See, where is the period of stay? There is no condition. So even if the person is in India for not even a single day, the person is not at all in India for the whole of the previous year, even then if these conditions are met, the person will be categorized as RNOR, right? A stateless rule applies only to a citizen of India. Therefore, it does not apply to a PIO who is not a citizen of India. So we have now discussed the special rules, the general rules, and the stateless rules, and now it's time to look at certain points which are common to all the above said rules. Now, under the various rules, we need to compute the presence in India, the number of days presence in India, and for that, date of arrival and date of departure from India, they are to be included. So a person comes from US to India, and his flight lands in India on 1st of November. So 1st of November will be included as one day. And say the person is departing from say Mumbai to Washington, and the flight departs on 1st of November. So 1st of November will be included. So date of arrival in India, date of departure from India will be included. But here there is an exception. There is a relief or a kind of relaxation. Okay, and this is what? This is Rule 126. And this says that in case of a citizen of India, this rule applies to what? This rule applies to a situation where the person is a citizen of India and the member of crew of a foreign bound ship. Foreign bound ship where the destination is in a foreign soil. The destination is outside India. Okay. Ship can be an Indian ship. Ship can be a foreign ship. That is not the condition. But the condition is it should be a foreign bound ship. You see, when we were talking about special rules, we saw the ship crew rule. And this applied to whom? To a citizen of India living in India in the previous year as a member of the crew of an Indian ship, not a foreign ship. Citizen of India leaving India in the previous year as a member of the crew of an Indian ship. And now we are talking about this rule, and this applies to whom? This also applies to a citizen of India and the member of the crew, but not necessarily to an Indian ship. It can be an Indian ship or a foreign ship, but the ship should be foreign bound, leaving India. Okay. In such a case, what is the special provision? The provision is that certain period is not included in the period of stay in India. It is excluded. It is not included. And what is that period? It begins with a date and ends with a date. It begins with what date? So there is this continuous discharge certificate CDC. Okay. So when the member of the crew joins the ship, okay, there is this CDC, there is this certificate where the dates are mentioned. So the date is entered into the CDC in respect of joining the ship. Okay, it is entered as part of the record that this member of the crew joined the ship on this date, as entered in the CDC. Similarly, when the person signs off from the ship, okay, when the person, so the ship comes, so the person signs off from the ship and the date is then entered into the CDC. Okay, so the period from the date of joining and ending on the date of signing off as marked or as recorded or as entered in the CDC, this period is not included in the period of stay in India. If this rule was not there, then the date of departure from India, okay, joining the ship, will be included, and date of arrival in, signing off will be included. But what is the relief here? The date of joining and the date of signing off is not included. Okay, Why? Because the period beginning with the date entered into the CDC in respect of joining the ship and ending on the date in respect of signing off are not included. Okay, so both these dates are also not included. They are excluded while computing the period of stay in India. Now, what is important in these rules is, as we saw, is the presence in India. The person should be present in India for these many days. So what is India? India does not necessarily include only the territory of India, the land. Okay, it includes the waters, it includes the continental shelf, it includes the territorial waters. So if the person is on a ship which is stationed in the territorial waters or off the coast, right, then can we say that the person is not in India? No, the person is in India, because the definition of India is wide. So accordingly, you need to keep in mind, what is a stay in India? Continuous stay in India is not necessary. The person can come and go and then again come and then again go. You need to compute the various periods. A stay can be anywhere in India. It doesn't matter. A stay in India is not merely restricted to land. We saw that definition of India is wide enough to include territorial waters, etc. Now, certain quick points. Now, just recollect what we discussed under the special rules, general rules, and stateless rules. And now there are certain points that will help you consolidate that learning. First, an individual who is in India for 182 days during the previous year is always a resident for that previous year. So simple check. The moment you find that the person is whoever that person be, whatever rule it may be, if the person is for 180 days or more in India, the person will straight away become a resident. No need to spend time on anything else. So even if that person is within a special rule, 182 days or more, the person becomes a resident. In the case of visit and income rule, 180 days, 182 days or more, you need to move to the general rule. Okay. You need to move to the general rule. When you come to the general rule, 182 days or more, straight away 182 days rule applies and the person becomes a resident. Right? So if the person is 182 days or more, the person will become a resident in all the cases. Now, an individual who is in India for less than 60 days during the previous year is always a non-resident for that previous year unless covered by a stateless rule. Unless covered by a stateless rule. If that be the case, then the person will be a deemed resident and a RNOR. So less than 60 days. So under the special rule, 182 days is the threshold. So less than 60 days, that means will not be a resident under the special rules, will not be a resident under the visit and income rule even, will not be a resident under the 182-day rule, will not be a resident under the 60-day rule even. So the person will not be a resident, the person will become a non-resident if the person is less than 60 days. The only exception is that the person is covered under stateless rule. Because even if there is no presence at all in India during the year, the person, if falls under the stateless rule, will become a RNOR. So if this is not the case, then the person will be a non-resident if the person is for less than 60 days in the previous year. Second basic stay condition of being in India for 365 days in the preceding 4 years. Okay, this is applicable only in case of 60-day rule or visit and income rule. You see, basic stay condition. Basic stay condition. For ship crew rule, employment rule, visit rule, it is only 182 days or more. The additional condition under the basic stay condition to become a resident of being 365 days or more in the preceding 4 years, it applies only in the case of two rules. One, visit and income rule, and second, as we discussed, the 60-day rule. Only these two rules. Okay. In all other rules, the condition is, the basic stay condition is 182 days or more in the previous year. Only 182-day and 60-day rules are applicable to individuals who are neither citizen of India nor PIO, that means pure foreigners. Because special rules are applicable to a citizen of India or PIO. What about pure foreigners who are neither CIO, who are neither PIO nor citizen of India? Special rules will not apply. So you will need to check the general rules. So 182-day rules and 60-day rules are applicable to a pure foreigner. So if in the question you have a person who is neither a citizen of India nor a PIO, you will straight away figure out that none of the special rules will apply. You straight away check the general rule. Okay. And then the stateless rule is if applicable. Concept of PIO is relevant for which rules? Only two rules. Visit rule and visit and income rule. Visit rule and visit and income rule. Okay, not under ship crew rule, not under employment rule, not under okay, so general rule is applicable to anyone and stateless rule is applicable to a citizen of India, not to a PIO. So concept of PIO specifically is relevant only to visit rule or visit and income rule. All rules are applicable to a citizen of India, whether it's special rules, whether a general rule, or whether a stateless rule. Okay. Individual following under the visit and income rule, if he is in India for less than 182 days in the previous year. Okay. Or following under the stateless rule is always RNOR. So a person will always be RNOR. The person cannot be ROR in two situations. If the person is becoming a resident under visit and income rule, provided his stay in India is for less than 182 days in the previous year, because if it is 182 days or more, we move to the general 182-day rule, and there the person becomes a resident and consequently ROR or RNOR. So under the visit and income rule, or if the person is falling under the stateless rule, the person will not be an ROR, the person will always be an RNOR. But individuals who are falling under the other rules can either be ROR or RNOR. Now we looked at the condition regarding computation of total income other than income from foreign sources. Under which rules is this computation relevant? It is relevant only for visit rule, visit and income rule, and stateless rule. And threshold is 15 lakh. Visit rule applies if such total income is up to 15 lakh. Visit and income rule and stateless rules apply if it is more than 15 lakh during the previous year. Okay. Now, while computing the number of days, if you are looking at the month of February and if it is a leap year, then you should remember to take 29 days, not 28 days. For example, if you are looking at 2024, okay, say previous year 23-24, and you are looking at February 24. In that case, you will count 29 days for February, not 28 days. Number of days in India under various rules is to be determined for the relevant previous year only. So number of days the person is present in India, it needs to be checked for every year. For every year. So if a foreign national comes to India, okay, for the first time and stays for 100 days each in previous year 1 and previous year 2, he would be a non-resident for both the previous years, even though the aggregate stay is 182 days or more. So foreign national is coming to India, foreign national, special rules will not apply, general rules will apply. 60-day rule will not apply, because to become a resident there is another condition of 365 days or more in the preceding 4 years, and he's coming for the first time, so this is not met. So what is left is the 182-day rule, and you say that okay, 100 days in 1 year and 100 days in next year, so 200 days in also he is satisfying this condition, so let's make him a resident. No, he will not be a resident because he is not satisfying this condition, because 182 days threshold will need to be checked for the previous year as such. You cannot combine the duration for one or more previous years. Now finally, we will summarize the steps to follow to determine the residential status. We will recapitulate. We have already kind of discussed the steps well, but it is the time to summarize. And here is a flow chart which will summarize the various steps. So step 1, first of all, you need to check the special rules. You need to check whether the special rule, whether any of the special rule applies or not. Okay. For that, you will need to check the applicability conditions. If any of the special rules applies, then you need to check whether the stay conditions are met or not, the basic stay conditions and the secondary stay conditions. If the stay conditions are met, then the individual will become a resident, and further a ROR or RNOR. In the case of visit and income rule, only RNOR, not ROR. Okay. If the special rule applies, but the stay conditions are not being met, the stay conditions are not being met, that means the individual is not becoming a resident under the special rule, then you will not go to check the general rule. No. because a special rule has become applicable and the person is not becoming a resident under the special rule. That means it doesn't mean that you can now check the general rule. No. Then in that case, you will straight away go to the stateless rule. If the stateless rule is applying, the person will become a RNOR. If not, then that means finally the person can be treated as a non-resident NR. But if the special rules do not apply, that means none of the conditions of applicability of any of the special rules is getting satisfied. In that case only you will move to check the general rule. And here again you will check the stay conditions, basic stay condition and secondary stay conditions. If they are met, then the person will become a resident and further ROR or RNOR. If the stay conditions of general rule are not met, that means the person is not becoming a resident under the general rule. In that case, you will then finally go and check the stateless rule. If it applies, the person will become a RNOR. If it doesn't apply, the person will become a non-resident. Okay. General rules do not apply where a special rule applies. Right? We have discussed this several times. If a special rule applies, you need to check the special rule. If the person is a resident under the special rule, good enough. If the person is not a resident under the special rule, don't go to the general rule. Straight away move to the stateless rule and figure out whether the person will be a RNOR or a non-resident. If none of the special rules apply, then straight away go to the general rule and check whether the person will be a resident, and further ROR or RNOR. If the person is not a resident under the general rule, straight away go to the stateless rule and check whether it applies or not. If yes, the person is RNOR, else a non-resident. So in nutshell, what it means is that if you are not able to categorize a person, an individual as a resident under any of the rules, then at the end the person will become a non-resident. Right? So if a special rule applies, but the individual does not become a resident there, and due to non-fulfillment of stay conditions, he cannot be treated as a resident by resulting to a general rule. For example, 60-day rule is not applicable to an individual to whom employment rule applies. And that's why you will now understand the logic of employment rule. See, for example, these special rules. These special rules actually give the advantage to a person by raising the threshold of becoming a resident to 182 days. If these special rules were not there, okay, the person would have become a resident even if the person was not there for 182 days or more in the previous year. For example, there is a citizen of India, okay, who has been in India throughout, and for the first time he is going out because he has got a job in the US. Okay. Now, if this rule was not there, if employment rule was not there, what you would have done? You would have moved to the general rule. Okay. And say if the person was, if the person has gone to the US and the person therefore was in India only say for 100 days in the previous year. So what you will do? You will come to 182-day rule and you will check that the person is not there for 182 days or more. Okay, because the person is only for 100 days, so you will say the person is not resident. But then you will check the 60-day rule and you will see that this condition is met because he is there for 100 days and he has been in India throughout, so this condition is met. So you will say that this person is a resident. Okay, so even if the person has gone to the US to do a job and he is only in the India in the current previous year for 100 years, you will make him a resident under the 60-day rule. But the government wants to give relief in such cases where a person is leaving India as a member of the crew of an Indian ship or for employment or under the visit rule even. There is a relief which the government wants to give, and in such case, the government doesn't want you to treat that person as a resident under this rule. So what it says that we will create a special rule. So the government creates a special rule, which is the employment rule. Under that, it raises the threshold of that 60 days to 182 days and dispenses with the condition of that 365 days in the preceding previous year. So it says that, okay, the person was in India for 100 days and then he has gone to do a job in the US, and therefore this employment rule applies, and 182 days or more he should be in India for the person to become a resident. Since that is not satisfied, the person will not be a resident under the special rule. So now you will be able to understand the logic of these special rules. So these special rules, they override the general rule and they raise the threshold of the person to become a resident. So this is the kind of relief that the government has given to such persons. We will now look at certain illustrations and this will help you to grasp the concept better. 182 days, 60-day rule. Okay, we will see the application of this rule. Determine the residential status of Mr. US, a citizen of USA. A citizen of USA not being a person of Indian origin in the following situations for the AY 24-25. Situation 1. Stay particulars for previous year 23-24. Comes to India for the first time on 1st April 23 and leaves India on 30th May 2023. Okay, so how do we solve this? What is the first step? The first step should be to check whether any of the special rule applies. So first step is what? Does a special rule apply? No, special rule doesn't apply. Why? Because special rules apply if a person is a citizen of India or a PIO, and here in this case Mr. US is not a citizen of India, the citizen of USA, and he is also not a PIO, and therefore none of the special rules apply. So what do we need to check? We need to check general rules. And general rules, first we will check 182-day rule and then we will check the 60-day rule. Okay, so under the 182-day rule, to become a resident, stay condition of 182 days or more in the current previous year. Is this satisfied? So what we need to figure out is the duration of stay in India, including 1st April 23 and 30th May 23, including both these dates. And this is 60 days. So this is not 182 days or more, and therefore this is not satisfied. Then we move to the alternative rule, which is the 60-day rule. And here there are twin basic stay conditions. The first basic stay condition is what? Whether the person is 60 days or more in the current previous year. Okay. Now here the present 60 is 60 days. Okay. And therefore this is satisfied. And date of arrival and departure are to be included. What is the second basic stay condition under the 60-day rule? Whether the person is 365 days or more in the preceding 4 previous years. Okay, this is not satisfied. Why? Because the person is coming for the first time to India, and therefore in the preceding 4 previous years, there has been no stay. So this is not satisfied. So the 60-day rule condition is also not satisfied. So is he a resident under any of the general rule? No. Okay, so now what we need to do? We now need to move to the stateless rule and check whether that is applicable. Stateless rule applies? No. Why? Because he is not a citizen of India. One of the conditions for stateless rules is that he should be a citizen of India. That is not the case. So general rule is not applicable. Stateless rule is also not applicable. So residential status is non-resident. Okay. Situation 2. In situation 2, Mr. US comes to India on a tour on 1st April 23 and leaves India on 30th June 23. He stays in a tourist boat moored near the coast of Goa. Stay particulars for preceding 4 previous year, 400 days. Residential status for preceding 10 previous years. Non-resident in 5 years. Stay particulars for preceding 7 previous years, 700 days. So what should be the first step to check whether a special rule applies or not? As we discussed for situation 2, same logic. He is neither a citizen of India nor a PIO, so special rules do not apply. So what we do? We go and check the general rules. General rule, first we check the 182-day rule, and the basic stay condition is 182 days or more in the current previous year. And what is the period of stay here? It is 91 days. If we compute 1st April 23 to 30th June, both dates inclusive, it will be 91 days. It is not 182 days or more, so this is not satisfied. Next we move to the alternate rule, which is the 60-day rule, and first basic stay condition is what? Should be 60 days or more in the current previous year, and it is 91 days, so this condition is satisfied. Okay, India includes territorial waters, so even if he is in a tourist boat moored near the coast of Goa, it doesn't matter, the period will be included as presence in India. Okay, the twin basic stay condition under the 60-day rule is the second basic stay condition under the 60-day rule is 365 days or more in the preceding 4 previous year. In the question it is given it was 400 days, so this is satisfied. This is satisfied. So is he a resident under the general rule? Yes, under the 60-day rule. Next, we need to check whether whether Mr. US will be ROR or RNOR. So there are two conditions, secondary stay conditions. What is the first one? Non-resident in 9 out of 10 preceding 10 previous years. It is given he was non-resident in 5 years, not 9 out of 10. So this is not satisfied. What was the second condition? Should be 729 days or less in the preceding 7 previous years. In the question it is given 700 days. So this is satisfied. This is satisfied. So one of the twin secondary stay conditions is satisfied, and therefore the person will not be ROR, the person will be RNOR. Only if none of these conditions was satisfied, then Mr. US could be said to be ROR. But since one of these twin conditions is satisfied, Mr. US will be said to be RNOR. Now we move to the next illustration, which also deals with the application of 182 or 60-day rule. And this was something that was asked in the CA 2018 May exam as well. Mrs. Karna Kapoor is a Hollywood actress. Her passport reveals the following information about her stay in India. And these are the various years and these are the dates about her stay in India. Find out her residential status for AY 24-25. So in this question, what we will need to do is we will need to compute the number of days she has been present in India for each of the previous years. So 23, 24 to 2015-16 based on these particulars, including these dates of entry into India and departure from India, we compute the number of days for each year. Okay, we compute the number of days for each year and then we move to figure out her residential status. So what should be the first step? The first step should be to find out if any of the special rule applies. And here, if you note, the information in the question is not given whether Mrs. Karna Kapoor is a citizen of India or a PIO. So we will need to make certain assumptions. And here we have made an assumption that she is neither a citizen of India or a PIO, and therefore none of the special rules apply, and therefore we need to check the general rules. So now we move to the general rule, and the first we check the 182-day rule, under which the basic stay condition to become a resident is 182 days or more in the current previous year. And in the current previous year, 23-24, it is 100 days. So this so she is not a resident under the 182-day rule. Okay. Now what we do is we move to the 60-day rule, and there are twin basic stay conditions. What is the first basic stay condition? She should be 60 days or more in the current previous year. Okay, and this is satisfied because in the current previous year she is for 100 days. So this first basic stay condition is satisfied. Second basic stay condition is what? She should have been 365 days or more in the preceding 4 previous years. Preceding 4 previous year is this. So if you aggregate the number of days, it will come to 365 days or more. So this condition will be satisfied. Okay, so both the basic stay conditions under the 60-day rule are satisfied, and therefore she is a resident under the general rule 60-day rule. Once a resident, we will need to figure out whether she is a ROR or RNOR. For that, there are twin secondary stay conditions. What is the first secondary stay condition? She should be non-resident in 9 out of 10 preceding 10 previous years. 9 out of 10 preceding previous years. So here we have got the information about these preceding previous years. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 only. So we don't have information for 10 preceding previous year, but it doesn't matter because with this information only we will be able to figure out. Okay, so if you carefully look at the data, she is a resident for previous year 2021 as her stay is 182 days or more. It is 201. So it is 182 days or more. So straight away you can figure out that she was a resident in 2021. So out of preceding 10 years, we have figured out that for at least 1 year, she is a resident. Now, if you look at previous year 2019-20, okay, her stay is 60 days or more in that previous year, 2019-20, 137 days. Okay, now we are checking the 60-day rule. Okay, so her stay is 60 days or more in that previous year and 365 days or more in the preceding 4 previous year. In the preceding 4 previous year, 400. 365 days or more. That means for previous year 2019-20 also she becomes a resident. So for these 2 previous years she has become a resident. That means she is not a non-resident in 9 out of 10 preceding previous years. So this first secondary stay condition is not satisfied. Okay, so you will need to apply some common sense. You will need to look at the question and you will be able to figure out the solution. Now we move to the second secondary stay condition of being 729 days or less in the preceding 7 previous years. 729 days or less preceding 7 previous year. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So if you add these, it will come to what? It will come to 704 days. So this will be 729 days or less, and therefore this is satisfied. So since one of these 2 secondary stay conditions is satisfied, what will be the residential status? The residential status will be that of a RNOR. Okay, so this will be the answer to this question. Now we will look at how to apply the ship crew rule. Determine the residential status of Suman. He is a citizen of India for AY 24-25. Situation 1. He is a member of the crew of a Thailand bound passenger ship, and it is an Indian ship. Voyage details: the ship departs from Chennai port on 1st June 23. Dates entered in Continuous Discharge Certificate CDC for joining and signing of the ship are 1st June 23 and 31st December 23. Stay in India during the last 4 previous years is 500 days. So what will be the first step? To check whether a special rule applies or not. Now here ship crew rule, which is the special rule, it applies. Why? Because Suman is a citizen of India, okay, who leaves India in the previous year as a member of the crew of an Indian ship, and therefore the conditions of this special ship crew rule are satisfied. Okay, and if you look at the special rules, this is the ship crew rule that we discussed some time back. Citizen of India leaving India in the previous year as a member of the crew of an Indian ship, and to become a resident it is 182 days or more in the previous year, and then we check the secondary stay conditions for ROR or RNOR. Okay, so stay in India, we need to figure out the stay in India, and for figuring out the stay in India, rule 126 will apply, which we discussed some time back. So wherever there is a case of a ship, then you need to figure out whether the special rule 126 provisions will apply or not. And we discussed that when we are computing the presence in India, the date of arrival and departure from India are to be included. But in case of a citizen of India, okay, who is a member of the crew of a foreign bound ship, whether Indian ship or foreign ship, it doesn't matter, then the period beginning from the date entered in the CDC in respect of joining the ship and ending on the date entered in the CDC in respect of signing off from the ship will not be included in the period of stay, and this is rule 126 provision. And these conditions, if you look, they are being met in our rule, okay, because he is a citizen of India, he is a citizen of India, member of the crew of a Thailand bound passenger ship, to foreign bound ship, and therefore what will happen is the dates enter into the CDC 1st June and 31st December 23 will not be included. So period from 1st June to 31st December we need to calculate, and that will be 214 days. Now this will need to be excluded as per rule 126. Thus the period of stay in India during the year will be 150. Actually it should be 152 days in this case, because we are talking about previous year 23-24, which is a leap year, and therefore 366 days are there in the year. Okay, so 152 days. And now when we talk about the ship crew rule, what was the basic stay condition to become a resident? The person should be 182 days or more in the current previous year, and in this case we have 152 days, okay, which is less than 182 days, and therefore this condition is not satisfied, and therefore is Suman a resident under the special rule, ship crew rule? No, he is not a resident. Since a special rule applies, this means we need not check the general rule. What we need to do is we need to straight away go to the stateless rule. But here if you look at the question, the Adequate details to figure out whether a stateless rule will apply or not are not given in the question. Total income, other than income from foreign sources, and all of those details are not given. So we assume that stateless rule will not apply, and consequently, see, the person is not a resident under the special rule, and stateless rules also do not apply. General rules we need not check, and therefore what happens? The person not being a resident under any of the rules, the person becomes a non-resident. Okay, so this is the way we need to solve. Situation 2. In situation 2, what we see is that the ship is not an Indian ship, the ship is a Thailand ship. So it is a foreign ship. And the voyage details are basically the same. And then we are told that stay in India during the last 4 previous years is 500 days. In the preceding 10 previous years, he was non-resident in 9 years. And in the preceding 7 previous years, he was 720 days in India. Okay. So once again, under the special rule, the first thing that we need to check is whether a special rule applies or not. Now the question is, in this case, does the ship crew rule apply? No, it does not apply. Why? Because ship crew rule applies where the ship is an Indian ship. In this case, the ship is not an Indian ship, it is a Thailand ship. So ship crew rule does not apply. So that means the special rule does not apply. If the special rule does not apply, what we need to do? We now need to go to the general rule. Check general rules. Okay. And the stay in India, what is the stay in India? We computed in situation 1, and rule 126 applies because he is the citizen of India, member of the crew of a foreign bound ship. Whether it be an Indian ship or a foreign ship, it doesn't matter. It is a foreign bound ship. So therefore, the period from 1st June to 31st December of 214 days need to be excluded, and therefore this will become 152 days. Since the special rule does not apply, we are checking the general rule, and now we check the 182-day rule, under which the stay condition, the basic stay condition is 182 days or more in the current previous year. Since it is 152 days, this is not satisfied. So we move to the second rule, which is the 60-day rule, and there are 2 conditions, basic stay conditions. The first one is 60 days or more in the current previous year. Since it is 152 days, this is satisfied. The second condition is that 365 days or more in the preceding 4 previous years, and here it is given 500 days. So this is also satisfied. Consequently, 60-day rule is satisfied, and the person becomes a resident under the 60-day rule. And now we need to check whether someone will become a ROR or RNOR, and for that there are 2 things that need to be checked. The first condition that needs to be checked is non-resident in 9 out of 10 preceding 10 previous years. In the question it is given 9 years, so this is satisfied. Okay. The second condition was what? The second condition is 729 days or less in the preceding 7 previous years, and here it is given 720 days. Okay, so which is 729 days or less, so this is also satisfied. Since both these conditions are satisfied, the person, that is Suman, will become a ROR in this case. In the next illustration, we will check how to apply the employment rule. Okay. Determine the residential status of Mr. India, a citizen of India. In the following situations for AY 24-25, he leaves for US on 1st July 23. His stay in India during the last 4 previous years is 100, 75, 75 and 150 days. Situation 1, the purpose of leaving India is he leaves for employment. So what should be the first step? The first step should be to check whether a special rule applies, and here you can very clearly see that employment rule applies. Why? Because he is a citizen of India. Mr. India is a citizen of India who leaves India in the previous year for the purposes of employment outside India. Okay, so the employment rule applies, and this is a special rule. This is a special rule, employment rule, and the basic stay condition to become a resident is 182 days or more in the previous year, and then we check whether the person will be ROR or RNOR as per the secondary stay condition. So 182 days is the threshold to become what? A resident. So we calculate the stay in India, and from 1st April 2023 to 1st July 2023, because he is leaving on 1st July, so the date of departure from India will be included. So 1st April to 1st July will be a period of 92 days, and now since employment rule is applicable, the threshold will be 182 days or more in the current previous year. And since the stay is only 92 days, this is not satisfied, and therefore, is Mr. India a resident under the special rule? No. So do we now need to go to the and check the general rule? No. So what do we need to do? We need to check the stateless rule, but adequate information regarding applicability of stateless rule is not given in the question. So we need to assume that stateless rule does not apply, and consequently, since he is not a resident under any of the rules, that means his residential status will be what? It will be a non-resident. Okay. Now we move to situation 2. In situation 2, the purpose becomes different. He is leaving for a vacation. He is leaving for vacation. In the preceding 10 previous years, he is a non-resident in none of these years. None of these years. Stay particulars for preceding 7 previous years is 1800 days. So now let's see. In situation 2, does the special rule apply? Does the employment rule apply in this case? No, it does not apply, because now he is not leaving for employment, he is leaving for vacation. So special rules not apply. So what we need to do? We need to now move to the general rules. Check general rules. Stay in India, we calculated in situation 1, it is the same, which is 92 days. Okay. Now in the general rule, we first check the 182-day rule. The basic stay condition is 182 days or more in the current previous year. Since it is 92 days, he is not a resident under the 182-day rule. Then we move to check the 60-day rule. There are twin conditions. The first basic stay condition is 60 days or more in the current previous year. Since it is 92 days, this is satisfied. The second basic stay condition is 365 days or more in the preceding 4 previous years. This is also satisfied. Okay, because we total this up, and this is 365 days or more. So both these twin conditions are satisfied. So under the 60-day rule, Mr. India will become a resident. Now we will check the secondary stay conditions for determining ROR or RNOR. First secondary stay condition is non-resident in 9 out of 10 preceding years. It is said he is non-resident in none of the years. So that means this condition is not satisfied. The second condition which we will check is 729 days or less in the preceding 7 previous years. But in the question it is given 1800 days. So this is also not satisfied. So none of the secondary stay conditions is satisfied. What this means? This means that the person will not be RNOR. The person will be a resident and ordinarily resident ROR. Under the 60-day rule, under the general rule. Okay, so this is how we will solve the question. In the next illustration, we will see how to apply the visit rule. Miss Rashmi visits India every year to meet her friends and relatives. Okay. Her stay is 70 days during the previous year 23-24. That means the current previous year. She came to India and stayed for 100 days in each of the preceding 4 previous years. Determine her residential status for AY 24-25 in the following situations, assuming her total income other than income from foreign sources for previous year 23-24 is rupees 5 lakh. Okay, that means it is up to 15 lakh. It is not more than 15 lakh. In situation 1, she is a citizen of Finland. She is a citizen of Finland. That means not a citizen of India. Her great-grandparents were born in India. Self, parents and grandparents were born in Finland. Okay, so is she a PIO? Who is a PIO? Who is a person of Indian origin? If he or any of his parents or grandparents were born in undivided India. So she, her parents or grandparents were born in Finland. Great-grandparents were born in India or undivided India. Even if it is undivided in India, great-grandparents were born. So she is not a person of Indian origin, because self-parents and grandparents were born in Finland, not in undivided India. Okay. So now we look at the situation. A special rule. First step is to find out if a special rule applies. No, it doesn't apply, because she is neither a citizen of India nor a PIO. So therefore, none of the special rules apply. It's as simple as that. So what we do? We check the general rules. Okay. First, we check the 182-day rule. Stay condition, 182 days or more in the current previous year. Stay is 70 days, which is given in the question. So this is not satisfied. Okay. Now we move to the 60-day rule. First basic stay condition is 60 days or more in the current previous year, and the stay is 70 days. Okay, so this is satisfied. The second basic stay condition under the 60-day rule is 365 days or more in the preceding 4 previous years. It is given she stays for 100 days in each of the preceding 4 previous years. That means 400 days in all. That means this is satisfied. So is Miss Rashmi a resident under the general rule, 60-day rule? Yes. So now we check the secondary stay conditions for ROR or RNOR. First secondary stay condition, non-resident in 9 out of 10 preceding 10 previous years. Okay, but in the question it is given 5 years, non-resident in 5 years. So this is not satisfied. Second secondary stay condition is 729 days or less in the preceding 7 previous years. It is given 800 days. So this is also not satisfied. So both the secondary stay conditions are not satisfied. This means that the residential status of Ms. Rashmi will be ROR, resident and ordinarily resident. Okay. Now we look at situation 2. In situation 2, Ms. Rashmi is a citizen of India and parents and grandparents were born in Finland. So the first question is whether a special rule applies or not. So visit rule applies. Visit rule. Visit rule. We saw the visit rule. Citizen of India or PIO who comes on a visit to India in the previous year and total income other than income from foreign sources is up to 15 lakh in the previous year. Okay, and here the threshold to become a resident is 182 days or more in the previous year. So what is our question? In this question, visit rule applies. Why? Because in situation 2, Ms. Rashmi is a citizen of India who comes on a visit to India in the previous year. Whether she is a citizen or whether she is a PIO or not, it is no more relevant because she is a citizen of India. Okay, so we need not worry whether she is a PIO in this case. And her total income other than income from foreign sources is up to 15 lakh. Why? Because in the question it is given it is 5 lakh. So that means visit rule becomes applicable and therefore the threshold to become resident is 182 days or more in the current previous year. And since it is 70 days as given in the question, this condition is not satisfied. So is Ms. Rashmi a resident under the special rule, visit rule? No. So now do we need to check the general rule? No. So what do we need to check? We need to check the stateless rule. If we check the stateless rule, whatever details may be given in the question, one condition is not getting satisfied. That is becoming very clear. And therefore, a stateless rule does not apply. Why? Because total income other than income from foreign sources for a stateless rule to apply should be more than 15 lakh. But in this case, it is only 5 lakh. It is only 5 lakh. So it is not more than 15 lakh. So that means stateless rule also doesn't apply. So that means Ms. Rashmi is not becoming a resident under any of the special rules. And what this means? This means that the residential status of Ms. Rashmi will be that of a non-resident. Clear? In the next illustration, we will check application of visit as well as visit and income rule. Mr. Finn living in Finland visits India on a project during the previous year 23-24. Determine his residential status for AY 24-25 in the following situations. He is liable to tax abroad. Situation 1. Citizen of India or a PIO? Yes. Total income other than income from foreign sources 10 lakh. Stay in India during the previous year 180 days. Stay in India during preceding 4 previous years 400 days. Residential status for preceding 10 previous years, non-resident in 9 years. Stay particulars for preceding 7 previous years is 500 days. What is the first step? Is to check whether a special rule applies or not. Yes, in this case, visit rule applies. Visit rule applies. Why? See, what is the visit rule? Visit rule, there are 2 rules, visit rule and visit and income rules for a citizen of India or a PIO who is coming on a visit to India in the previous year. For that, we need to figure out what is the total income other than income from foreign sources. If it is up to 15 lakh in the previous year, visit rule applies. If it is more than 15 lakh in the previous year, visit and income rule applies. Okay. If visit rule applies, then to become a resident, he should be 182 days or more in the previous year, and then we check the secondary stay conditions. If it is the case of visit and income rule, then he should be in India for 120 days or more in the previous year and in India for 365 days or more in the preceding 4 previous years and should be less than 182 days in the previous year, and then he becomes a resident, but then he doesn't become a ROR, he only becomes a RNOR. Okay, this is what we have already discussed. So let's go back to our question and let's see how to solve this question. So in situation 1, whether a special rule will apply. So Mr. Finn is a citizen of India or PIO. It is given in the question. Okay. He comes on a visit to India in the previous year and his total income other than income from foreign sources is up to 15 lakh because in the question it is given 10 lakh. So visit rule applies, and therefore the condition to become a resident is what? Under the visit rule, 182 days or more in the current previous year. And here what it is given? 180 days in the question. So this is less than 182 days, so this is not satisfied. So he is not a resident under the special rule. So what we need to do? We need not go to the general rule. We now go to the stateless rule, and stateless rule does not apply in this case. Why? Because total income from Indian sources is not more than 15 lakh, which is the condition for stateless rule. And also he is liable to tax abroad. He is liable to tax abroad. So stateless rule, we saw a stateless rule. We saw a stateless rule. He should be a citizen of India. Total income other than income from foreign sources should be more than 15 lakh, and he should not be liable to tax in any other country or territory. But since these conditions are not being satisfied in our case, so what happens? Mr. Finn becomes what? He becomes a non-resident. Situation 2. Citizen of India or PIO, yes, total income other than income from foreign sources is 20 lakh, and rest everything remains the same as that was in situation 1. So first step, to check whether a special rule applies, visit and income rule applies. Why? Because he is a citizen of India or PIO who comes on a visit to India in the previous year, and his total income other than income from foreign sources is more than 15 lakh because it is given 20 lakh here. So under the visit and income rule, there are two basic conditions for becoming a resident. The first one is 120 days or more in the current previous year. This is satisfied because it is given 180 days in the question. Second is what? 365 days or more in the preceding 4 previous years. This is also satisfied because it is given 400 days in the question. Now once this is satisfied, once both the basic stay conditions are satisfied, is Mr. Finn resident under the special rule? Yes, under the visit and income rule. And once he is a resident under the visit and income rule, and we also find in the question that his stay in the current year is less than 182 days, it is 180 days, and therefore the person will become a RNOR, because under the visit and income rule, if all the conditions are satisfied, the person cannot become ROR, he can only become RNOR. So the answer will be RNOR in this case. Now we move to situation 3. In situation 3, citizen of India or PIO, yes, total income other than income from foreign sources 20 lakh, stay in India during the previous year 110 days, and rest of the things remain the same as in situation 2. So in situation 3, what is the special rule which applies? It is a visit and income rule which applies because he is a citizen of India or PIO who comes on a visit to India in the previous year, and his total income other than income from foreign sources is more than 15 lakh. It is 20 lakh as given in the question. So under the situation 3, visit and income rule, to become a resident, two conditions to be satisfied. First one, 120 days or more in the current year. This is not satisfied. Why? Because in the question it is only given 110 days. Second, stay condition of 365 days or more in preceding 4 years. This is satisfied because in the question it is given 400 days. But since both the conditions are not satisfied, is Mr. Finn a resident under the visit and income rule? No. Do we need to check general rule? No. Do we need to check the stateless rule? Yes. Is he a deemed resident under the stateless rule? No. Because for the simple reason that in the question it is given that he is liable to be taxed abroad. So that's why stateless rule does not apply. So since he is not a resident under any of the rules, consequently he becomes a non-resident. Now we move to situation 4. In situation 4, he is neither a citizen of India nor a PIO. Okay. Rest of the details remain the same as in situation 3. So what about the special rule? The special rule does not apply. Why? Because he is neither a citizen of India nor a PIO. So what do we need to do? Check general rules. So we need to check general rules. 182 day rule. Stay condition is 182 day or more in the current previous year. No, because the stay is of 110 days only. So this is not satisfied. Alternate rule is 60-day rule. First basic stay condition is 60 days or more in the current previous year. 110 days is 60 days or more, so this condition is satisfied. Second basic stay condition is 365 days or more in the preceding 4 previous years. Okay, this is also satisfied because it is given 400 days in the question. So both the conditions under the 60-day rule to become a resident are satisfied. So he is a resident under the general rule. Okay. Now we need to check ROR or RNOR, and there are two conditions. First, secondary stay condition of non-resident in 9 out of 10 preceding 10 previous years. This is satisfied because in the question it is given non-resident in 9 years. Okay. Second is 729 days or less in the preceding 7 previous years. This is also satisfied because 500 days is what is given in the question. So both the secondary stay conditions are satisfied, and consequently the residential status of Mr. Finn in this situation will be RNOR. Now in the next illustration, we check applicability of stateless rule, visit rule, as well as visit and income rule. Okay. Mr. Rakesh lives abroad and he is not liable to tax in any other country or territory by reason of his domicile, residence, or any other criteria of similar nature. Determine his residential status for AY 24-25 in the following situations. Situation 1. Citizen of India, yes. Total income other than income from foreign sources 20 lakh. Stay in India during visit in the previous year 10 days only. Stay in the preceding 4 previous years is 400 days. Residential status for preceding 10 previous years is non-resident in 8 years. Stay particulars for preceding 7 previous years is 600 days. Okay. First step is to check whether a special rule applies. Now here we can clearly see that visit and income rule is applicable. Why? Because Mr. Rakesh is a citizen of India who comes on a visit to India in the previous year, and his total income other than income from foreign sources is more than 15 lakh. It is given in the question 20 lakh. So visit and income rule, to become a resident, twin basic stay conditions need to be satisfied. Twin basic stay conditions need to be satisfied. We have already discussed. Okay. The first one is what? 120 days or more in the current previous year. This is not satisfied because he is in India only for 10 days. Second stay condition is what? 365 days or more in the preceding 4 previous years. This is satisfied. Why? Because it is 400 days. Okay. But since both conditions are not satisfied, Mr. Rakesh is not a resident under the special rule. But since special rule is applicable, we should not go and check the general rule. A special rule is applicable, but he is not a resident under the special rule. So now we need to go finally and check whether a stateless rule applies or not. A stateless rule applies. Why? Because what are the conditions for stateless rule? We have already seen. Citizen of India, total income other than income from foreign sources more than 15 lakh and not liable to tax in any other country or territory. Okay. So here, what is the position? He is a citizen of India. Total income other than income from foreign sources is more than 15 lakh. It is 20 lakh. And he is not liable to tax in any other country or territory. Not liable to tax. So conditions of stateless rule are satisfied. So even though he is not a resident under any of the special rules, even then stateless rule will apply, and he will become a deemed resident, and he will be treated as a RNOR. Okay. Now we come to situation 2. In situation 2, he is a citizen of India, but total income other than income from foreign sources is only 10 lakh. Current year's stay is 100 days. Preceding 4 previous years' stay is 400 days. He is non-resident in preceding 10 previous years. He is non-resident in 8 years, and preceding 7 previous years he was for 600 days. Now here, what is the special rule that applies? Here visit rule applies. Not visit and income, but visit rule applies. Why? Because he is a citizen of India who comes on a visit to India in the previous year, and his total income other than income from foreign sources is not more than 15 lakh. It is only 10 lakh. And what was the condition to become a resident under the visit rule? 182 days or more in the current previous year. Is that satisfied? No, because the stay is only 100 days. So this is not satisfied. So what this means? It means that Mr. Rakesh is not a resident under the special rule. So we don't also go to the general rule. So what we do? We go to the stateless rule. And whether stateless rule applies? No, because one important condition is not being met, that total income other than income from foreign sources should be more than 15 lakh. It is not the case here because it is only 10 lakh. So stateless rule, so he is not becoming a resident in either the special rule or even the stateless rule. So he is not a resident under any of the rule. So consequently, his residential status will be what? It will be non-resident. One illustration, especially on the stateless rule. Mr. Z is an Indian citizen. He runs a business in country X in the Middle East. During PY 23-24, he visits India for 35 days. His business income is 20 lakh from country X, earned and received there. But he is not liable to income tax in that country under its taxation laws. He has also earned interest of rupees 5 lakh in country Y, earned and received there. Though he is liable to income tax in country Y, he has been exempted from such liability under a notification. Okay, so there is country X and then there is country Y. As far as India is concerned, he owns a house in Chennai from which he earned income of rupees 16 lakh computed. During the year, determine the residential status of Mr. Z for AY 24-25. Now, what we first note is that Mr. Z is an Indian citizen. Secondly, we note that he visits India for 35 days. So his presence in India is only for 35 days. So whether it be a special rule or general rule, he will not be a resident because his stay is only 35 days in the previous year. So he is not a resident under any special or general rule. So what we will straight away do is we will need to go and check the stateless rule. And a stateless rule, he should be a citizen of India. His total income other than income from foreign sources should be more than 15 lakh and he should not be liable to tax in any other country or territory. So he is a citizen of India. His total income other than income from foreign sources is 16 lakh from Chennai house, which is more than 15 lakh. The third condition is that he should not be liable to tax in any other country or territory. Okay. Now, as far as country X is concerned, he is not liable to tax in country X. As far as country Y is concerned, okay, though he is liable to tax in country Y, he has been exempted from such liability and under a notification. So he is not supposed to pay any income tax there. So merely because he has been exempted from the tax liability, it doesn't mean that he is not liable to tax. He is liable to tax, but he has been exempted. So that means one cannot say that he is not liable to tax in country Y. So he is liable to tax in country Y. That's why the third condition of stateless rule, that he should not be liable to tax elsewhere, is not being met, because Mr. Z can be said to be liable to tax in country Y. Hence, he does not satisfy all the conditions of stateless rule, and therefore he is not a deemed resident under the stateless rule. So he is not resident under any of the rules. So what this means is that Mr. Z will become a non-resident in India for AY 24-25. Suppose in this case in country X, in country Y also there was no income tax liability. We are not talking about exemption. Just like country X and country Y also say he was not liable to income tax in the first place. In that case, the third condition of stateless rule would also get satisfied, and in that case he would be categorized as a deemed resident and he would be a RNOR for AY 24-25. Okay. Now we will look at an illustration where we will be required to compute the total income other than income from foreign sources. Okay. Sushant is a citizen of India employed with a Japanese company and posted in Tokyo. He is liable to tax in Japan. Okay. He has shared the following particulars for PY 23-24. This is situation 1, situation 2. Income from salary received in Tokyo, income from house property, and so on. And these are the details of income. Okay. And then it is mentioned in the question, Sushant was in India for a total of 400 days in the preceding 4 previous years, 2019-22, 22-23. He came on a visit to India for 150 days during the current previous year, 23-24. Determine his residential status in India for previous year, 23-24. Now, if we look at the question, there are two situations. And the common aspect is that Sushant is a citizen of India. Sushant is a citizen of India. He is liable to tax in Japan. These are the details of his income. Preceding 4 previous years stay is 400 days and he comes on a visit to India. So you see that he is a citizen of India who is coming on a visit to India. Okay. So once you note these details, he is a citizen of India who is coming on a visit to India in the previous year, then you will need to do as the next step, check whether special rule, visit rule or visit and income rule applies. And for that you will need to compute total income other than income from foreign sources. If it is up to 15 lakh, visit rule will apply. If it is more than 15 lakh, visit and income rule will apply, and accordingly, you will need to figure out whether the person is a resident under these rules. Okay, so here you note that Sushant is a citizen of India and he is coming on a visit to India for 150 days during the previous year. So the next thing that you should check is the amount of total income other than income from foreign sources, and that is what you should compute before you figure out the residential status. Okay, now if you note the computation, how do we do it? Total income other than income from foreign sources is computed below, and we compute it for both situation 1 and situation 2, and these are basically the details which are reproduced in this table of computation. So first one is income from salary received in Tokyo. Okay, so before that, let's take a look at what is income from foreign sources, which we discussed some time back. Income from foreign sources that need to be excluded. So income which accrues or arises outside India and is not deemed to accrue or arise in India, that is income from foreign sources. Even if income accrues or arises outside India, but it is derived from a business controlled in India or from a profession set up in India, then it will not be treated as income from foreign sources. That means if the income accrues or arises from a business outside India, but the business is controlled in India, or if the income accrues or arises outside India from a profession which is set up in India, it will be treated as Indian source income. It will not be treated as income from foreign sources. Okay, clear? So now let's go back to the question and see the computation. So income from salary received in Tokyo. So it is accrued, it is income accruing or arising outside India. So it is income from foreign sources. So we do not include it in either of the situation. Next is income from house property in India. So house property in India, so income is accruing or arising in India. Okay. So this will form part of total income other than income from foreign sources. In other words, total income from Indian sources. So 3 lakh is the amount. So we include 3 lakh in both the situations. Third is dividend from shares of Indian company. So under section 9, we know that dividend from shares of Indian company is deemed to accrue or arise in India, and therefore it becomes Indian income. It is not income from foreign source. So that means we include this as well, and the amount is 1 lakh rupees. Next is income from business carried on in Japan and controlled in India. So business is carried on in Japan, the income from business is accruing or arising outside India, but the business is controlled in India, so it will not form part of income from foreign sources, it will form part of income from Indian sources. So 6 lakh rupees and 12 lakh rupees respectively, we will need to include because it is not income from foreign sources. Next is income from a profession. It is carried on in Japan, so income is accruing or arising outside India, and the profession is set up in Japan, the profession is not set up in India. That means the income is income from foreign sources. So we will not include 4 lakh. So we will not include 4 lakh. Next is interest on bonds of the government of Japan. So it is not Indian income, it is income from foreign sources. We will not include this as well. So this becomes the gross total income. Under situation 1, 10 lakh, and under situation 2, 17 lakh. And now we are required to compute total income other than income from foreign sources. So when you compute total income, you know that you are supposed to give effect to the deductions from the gross total income under chapter VIA as well. So here we have this information: amount deposited in PPF account in India. So that means ATC deduction will need to be allowed of 1,50,000. So 1,50,000 is what we will need to allow as deduction, and consequently total income other than income from foreign sources will be 8,50,000 in situation 1 and 15,50,000 in situation 2. That means up to 15 lakh in situation 1 and more than 15 lakh in situation 2, right? So now let's move to situation 1. So we need to determine the residential status. First step, does a special rule apply? Yes, it is a visit rule. Why? Because Sushant is a citizen of India who comes on a visit to India in the previous year, and total income other than income from foreign sources is not more than 15 lakh. We just now saw in the computation. To become a resident, he should be 182 days or more in the current previous year. This is not satisfied because his stay in India is only for 150 days as given in the question. So is he a resident under the special rule? No. So Do we need to go to the general rule? No, we need to go to the stateless rule. Does the stateless rule apply? No. Why? Because one of the conditions under that rule is total income other than income from foreign sources should be more than 15 lakh, which is not the case here. The other condition is that he should not be liable to tax elsewhere, but he is liable to tax in Japan. So because of these things, because of these facts, a stateless rule doesn't apply to him. So he is not becoming a resident under any rule. So his ultimate residential status will be as that of a non-resident. In situation 2, facts remaining the same, the total income other than income from other sources is more than 15 lakh as we computed. So visit and income rule will apply. Since he is a citizen of India who comes on a visit to India and his total income other than income from foreign sources is more than 15 lakh, under which he will become a resident if the two basic stay conditions are satisfied. First is that he should be 120 days or more in the current previous year. Since it is 150 days, this is satisfied. The second stay condition is that he should be 365 days or more in the preceding 4 previous years. It is 400 days. So this is also satisfied. So is he a resident under the special rule? Yes, under the visit and income rule. So now do we need to go to the stateless rule? No. Once he is a resident under the special rule, visit and income rule, further we need to check whether his stay in India is less than 182 days. It is, because it is 150 days. Since it is less than 182 days, he will become a resident under the visit and income rule, and he will be treated as a RNOR, because under the visit and income rule, the person cannot become a ROR. Okay. So this brings us to the end of this video. We have looked at all these illustrations, examining the application of all the various rules, and in the income tax book plus income tax practice, there are lots of questions and there are lots of MCQs. I will suggest you go and solve them if you have any doubt on whatever we have discussed in this video, and also any doubt or clarification that you need while solving these questions for your practice. Just feel free to WhatsApp me, to Telegram me if you have got my number. If you don't have my number, just write your doubts or points in the comments box. And I hope this video will bring a great deal of clarity to you as far as this concept of determining the residential status of individual is concerned, and you will not make any mistake in any question that may come past you in your exams. All the best to you. Good luck to you. See you soon in my next video. Goodbye.